Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Pools Pod. It is the beginning of February, and unfortunately, we are coming off a very difficult defeat to Aldershot Town. We'll come on to that shortly, but joining me today, a first-time guest from London Town in the form of Kieran Gill, Daily Mail reporter covering Chelsea Football Club. Hello, Kieran. How are you?
Hello, mate. How are you? I'm good, thank you.
I am not too bad, and it is a bit of a left field thing where I say a Daily Mail reporter who covers Chelsea has joined us, but that is because he is Hartlepool United born and bred and still supports the club from down south. Kevin, you have said previously that you're not able to get to the games as much these days. Obviously, you are in London and you cover Chelsea, who play on a weekend, mainly on Saturdays. So, how do you still keep in touch with the club from down south? Is it a matter of just keeping an eye on results? Is it family connections? What's the story behind it?
Yeah, so it was actually LinkedIn reminded me yesterday that was my 12-year anniversary since I started working for the Daily Mail. So I've been down here a long time now. So I used to be a season ticket holder in a town end. My dad's still a season ticket holder in a town end. So essentially, it's a case of every weekend, because I'm at Chelsea games, and if Hartlepool happen to be playing somewhere down south when Chelsea aren't playing, I think my wife would kill me if I said I'm going to use my day off to go and watch Hartlepool when she's already not that big of a fan of football. So it's essentially a case of just keeping an eye on scores from afar, unfortunately, and occasionally speaking to my dad to see what it's like.
Well, I can only assume the reports from him have been a bit middling recently, shall we say. The 3-0 defeat at home to Aldershot on Saturday. Unexpected defeat, I think it's fair to say. Not that we were ever confident of winning 3-0, but I think a 3-0 loss was something of a surprise. It's been a couple of weeks since the podcast is recorded. We have also drawn away at Brackley, and Nicky Featherstone has been criticised in quite a few places, unfortunately, for not going for games as much as I think people might like him to. I mean, you've seen the teams of the past where we've played such football where we go for teams, and even if we do lose heavily, we still go for games. And is it something not just with Pulls, but in your experience, have you seen teams do that these days? Are they more expansive perhaps than they used to be, or do you see a lot of teams sort of pulling back and hoping that they can contain teams rather than going for them?
Yeah, it seems to be like, obviously, because I don't get to watch Hartlepool often now. I don't have a clue if they're the type who play from the back, for example. I don't know their style of play these days, but it seems to be. I feel like a lot more, especially lower down the pyramid. I feel like a lot of teams go safety first, if that's fair to say. Because I used to love watching that Hartlepool of old. Because I'll give you an idea of when I think of Hartlepool, what I picture is basically Effie and Williams scoring that goal against Darlow 3-0 away. I picture sort of trying to think. Matty Robson taking on three men, but then unfortunately skied the ball into Morrison's car park. But you know what happens?
That's a
Mickey
sight we've
Nelson,
seen many times since, let alone Matty Robson.
like Mickey Nelson heading clear everything. A graying Mark Tinkler maybe next to him. Hugh Robertson thundering free kicks from 30 yards for a laugh. Adam Boyd, Joel Porter, Anthony Sweeney in the middle, Dimi Constantin. That's kind of my main era when I was following Hartlepool home and away, and I love that team. I feel like the optimism around that team was absolutely even. I can't. I'm terrible with years, but I remember going to Blackpool away, and we lost 4-0, and I didn't care so much because after that I was going to go to Coral Island, to Blackpool Tower, to Pleasure Beach. If there's anywhere you want to go and lose 4-0, it's probably Blackpool away. But that sort of the Hartlepool of old, we were never glamorous or anything, but I feel like you gave us, or it gave me, a hope every weekend. I used to love going to the games. I'd go with my dad. We went all over the country, and so I don't know. Is there that optimism around it now? Because obviously we've got a new owner. So from my distance all the way down in London, from what I read, and obviously I'm not around the Vic anymore, sort of thing. I I figured optimism would be high, but then we have got a new owner, but then it's the same platform that's been left in place by Raj. It's going to take time to change that whatever culture had crept in under Raj.
I would say so. I think the optimism was clearly there come New Year's Eve and New Year's Day where the takeover happened. And there was a lot of surprise, I think, in a lot of areas because it had been kept so hush hush. It had been kept under the radar. There was NDAs in place, and it had all been done basically undercover, which, from a business perspective, you can certainly appreciate because you don't want to broadcast everything all over social media, etc. And it was done pretty professionally by all accounts. And the optimism certainly carried on. Our game that Saturday was postponed against Woking, and then unfortunately we went and lost 4-0 at Woking. So it was something of a very Pools thing to do. I think it's fair to say that we had all that optimism, and then we went and put in probably our worst performance of the season. Debatable given the lower league cup exits. But
But
then we
then
had two
there
more
were,
games.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
there were loads of fans at the Vic for the first home game under Landon, weren't there? Because my dad said it was good atmosphere, essentially.
Absolutely. It was the game against Altrincham. It was live on DAZN. It was 12:30 kickoff. So, to be fair, theoretically, you say when it's on the television, when it's earlier on in the day, you wouldn't necessarily expect that big of a bump. But I can't remember the exact number. I think it was about 5,200, something like that, with probably about 100, 150 from Altrincham. Maybe it's 200. So it was a very big attendance for that day. It wasn't the best performance. We did get the penalty. We did win the game. And then 3 days later against Gateshead on the Tuesday night, we were at home again. Gateshead looked very good in that first half, 1-0 down at half time. And then the red card basically changed the game. And as I said to you before we start recording, Nicky Featherstone seems to have a habit recently, since he's taken over. He reacts rather than does things to win the game. So he reacts to things that happen and then goes for the game. So that red card against a team that had lost 13 in a row in all competitions and were bottom of the league, were 1-0 up, and then they went down to 10 men, and that's when Nicky Featherstone, went for the jugular. And when we went to two up front, as I've said many times before on this program, on this podcast, and everyone will be able to tell you so, we've always worked better with two up front. And I'm sure it'll be the same, obviously, when you were home and away, and it's something that's been baked into this club that two up front is the way to go.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like the phrase DNA of the club because I think it is very what is that like for any club?
Yeah.
Because clubs' fortunes can change. You can go up, you can go down. You can play. You might have to play a certain way if you're up against it. There are things that don't chime with that phrase. But I've always thought you look at the partnerships that we've had in the past. Your Boyd and Porter, your Boyd and Williams, Porter and Williams. Those three. You look at your Joe Allen and Paul Baker in the early 90s. Luke Armstrong and Reece Oates a few years ago. And then even though Danny Johnson hasn't had the best time of it this season, him and Alex Reid, when they've played together, even though Johnson's still not scoring, it's just that foil. And if you have two strikers in the box, and you'll know this from, to be fair, it's rare in the Premier League these days that the teams play with two because the pack in midfield.
Because I was at Arsenal Chelsea the other night, and then the lineups dropped, and we were like, João Pedro and Liam Delap are both starting. We were like, two up top. Premier League team using two up top.
Shoved him on the right wing, didn't he?
Doesn't happen anymore. Turns out Delap was a right winger, which didn't particularly work. But yeah, it's just not the norm in footy anymore. Even though, like you say, when you had Boydie with his beautiful finesse, and Joel Porter just never stopped running on his behalf, essentially. If you get two strikers who can complement each other, I think fans like to see that. They love seeing the link up because it's a bit of a throwback, but I quite like a throwback.
Well, absolutely. The old saying, 4-4-2. Bit of Mike Bassett. You ever watch Mike Bassett? We're not gonna do the exact phrase that he said because we're trying to keep it clean. But
you told me I'm not allowed to swear.
Well, we did. Yeah, we said we don't swear on this podcast as much as there may be a few words in away from the podcast. Yeah, we won't go there. But it is the old-fashioned way of British football, isn't it? It's what makes British football what it is. It's physicality. It's the idea of contrasts and styles. And as you mentioned before, with the lower leagues, it seems to have filtered through from the Premier League, and in particular Pep Guardiola since he arrived, that a lot of teams try to play out from the back and they don't take many risks. We've seen it with Pools certainly this season, where Nicky Featherstone has taken over, and it's very much an idea of keeping the ball and keeping solid and recycling the ball and not taking enough shots from outside the box. We don't get it why we don't get the ball in the box. There aren't many players in the box when the ball does come in because there's only Alex Reid up there usually on his own. And unfortunately, there's no one in the box because he's the only striker. And usually he's helping in the build up because no one's getting the ball into him. It's a very frustrating way of playing. And with the exception of, say, the top 5 or 6 teams in the league, who are very comfortably the top 5, 6 teams in the league pretty much, we don't see, certainly Pulls and enough teams taking shots and making the keeper work, or they're not getting into the box to get on the end of crosses. It's very frustrating, all in all.
Yeah, I mean, devil's advocate. I suppose Nicky, it's his first managerial job, isn't it? So so if he is more reactive than proactive, and he's probably still developing his own ideas as an actual coach. If you get me, because and I know no one wants to be the guinea pig, I suppose, but he is. He's losing his virginity as manager of Hartlepool.
What a
So,
phrase that is, by the way.
so I'm sure he'll still be developing his own style and ideas, and maybe hopefully it improves. Hopefully you see a bit more attacking football rather than just because I covered Chelsea under Maresca, and you often felt it was just possession for possession's sake, and it was boring sideways. Yeah, you might have 75% possession, but you still lost 2-1 or whatever. So I'm sure Nicky will improve, and maybe we'll see more of his own ideas eventually. But he has had 3 months in the job, but it is still his first job, I guess.
That's a fair point. I think sideways and backwards, it very much describes the current situation. I think a lot of fans would tell you that it's, as you say, possession for possession's sake. You could very well have been describing Hartlepool United these days with how you described Enzo Maresca's Chelsea. They're reticent to take any chances. It would seem they're focused on keeping possession. It may well be to do with the fact, as you say, it is his first managerial job and he's trying to ease himself into it, if you like, following a decent run of form when he was caretaker. But it's interesting that his deal only runs to the end of the season, which, given the takeover that's happened since Raj appointed him, maybe that was an
Yeah,
indicator at the time. However, it also means that at the end of the season, he will be judged by Landon Smith, effectively,
yeah,
as to whether he will be able to take the club forward.
and I've covered enough managers when new owners have come in to know that they get worried when there's new owners in, because they'll come in with their own set of ideas or targets, and unfortunately for the manager who's currently in place, sometimes that means the new owner looks at him and thinks, well, you're the old owner's choice, I want to make my own choice. So we'll have to see. It'll all come down to results, won't it? The mid-table National League, maybe knocking on for a playoff place. And it's like, from afar, I was speaking to one of my colleagues the other day, who's an Oldham fan, about how hard it is to get out of the National League. And I know they're still pushing for the 3-up, the 3-up campaign, which would be quite helpful. Because I'm happy to not go further down the pyramid, but it's just so hard to get out of. And I don't know, is Nicky the guy to oversee that? I suppose for Landon and whoever's advising him to decide as the season unfolds, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a bit difficult at the moment to say whether he is the man. I think, he's getting the players in. He's getting some players in at the moment. It's not exactly a glut of signings,
Mm.
as you imagine at the start of Landon Smith's tenure. He's eased himself in and he's admitted himself, the owner, that, it'll take some time for him to get used to the running of the club. Basically,
Well,
he's had his eye on a soccer club up to this point, and he's happy that he's involved. But certainly, in terms of the football side of things, he's only really experience or his expertise is the commercial side. So for footballing reasons, you'll have to get people in who he
Yeah.
can trust and who know how is best to run the club from the footballing side of
Well,
things.
well, I mean, when next time I'm at Chelsea do, and I happen to see one of the owners there, Todd Bowley or Bedadek Bali, I'll say, look, we've got an American guy who's just bought our club, Hartlepool. Can you send a few of your extremely talented academy lads? Send them to
Hey,
Hartlepool. It would age them. Yeah,
well, yeah, absolutely. It certainly would.
yeah,
Well,
they'd grow up quick, I reckon.
well, they do. I mean, when it comes to Premier League sides, when it comes to Championship sides, even League One sides, it's basically an education. We've always said in this country, the pyramid is of brilliance, significance to the Premier League and the Championship. You see, the most famous example in recent years probably being Jamie Vardy, where he came up from non-league, went through Fleetwood. I think they were in the conference at that point, and then went to Leicester and never looked back from there. We've seen quite a few, in recent years who have done that. So sending players in your academy down to the lower leagues, it's going to give them a better education inside, say, 5, 10 games than it will do for 3 years of academy play, where they're playing up against, fully grown, full-sized tank
Mm.
midfielders, where they're going to get shrugged off the ball if they're not strong enough to do it. You're not going to get enough time on the ball. There are plenty of benefits for it. You said about Poles being mid-table, currently ninth with 30 games played, 44 points taken. It's not the worst record in the world, but we've had multiple chances this season to get into the playoffs and it just hasn't materialised. We've seen Southend drop points, we've seen Halifax drop points. It just doesn't seem to happen. And the other kicker is that Southend currently have 3 games in hand. They're above us at the moment. You've got the likes of Woking and Wealdstone, who are 11th and 12th, but they've got 3 games in hand. They could catch us up by winning those games. There is a lot of sort of I don't know what the word is, perhaps caveats where even though we're ninth at the moment and only 3 points off the playoffs as it stands, there are things to consider, such as your games in hand, etc., where
Mm.
it's only going to get more difficult. And it's worth saying as well that our last, I think, 5 or 6 games are against teams in the top six. I think so.
Yeah.
Scunthorpe, Rochdale, Borehamwood, Forest Green. I think our last game's against Boston away. That's a pretty decent one.
So
But
that'll be
before that last game,
so
it's
that'll be when everyone's getting dressed up as Uncle Sam, I reckon. I think that's a good
Well, to,
shout.
well, to be fair, that's a great shout. I mean, to be fair, at the start of the season, as soon as Boston came out, the first thing that everyone said was Pilgrims.
I mean, yeah, I think that's quite a good shout as well.
Yeah,
New
but Uncle
American
Sam, to be
owner.
fair, given the given the situation, absolutely. I mean, that's up to whoever will come out with that. I'm assuming about 3 days before we actually play Boston, and then everyone rushes to eBay trying to get next day delivery. It's what seems to happen these days, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, given how the season may well go from this point, it is very it's up in the air because there were a lot of players coming in, sort of wingers and attackers and things. Gavin Holohan's just returned to the club as well, which
Yeah,
will provide a boost from that part of things, even if he's not what he was before. He's now 34, and at the end of the
yeah.
day, players, will deteriorate as they get older. That's just a matter of
I
fact.
mean,
But if he can, oh, go on.
I'm sorry. From afar, I always look on at Wrexham with envy. I don't know if many other Hartlepool fans do this, but I wrote a piece, it was a while back now, about how Wrexham's owners were looking at Hartlepool first. Yeah, and I'm sure it's known, but it's because part of the reason I was told by someone involved in the Wrexham ownership was their idea was they could call the documentary Deadpool, which would make sense, Dead Pools.
Hmm.
And but I mean, I'm sure you know the story where Raj just, I don't think he took too kindly to the anonymity, where an intermediary sort of said on behalf of two, like, I think it was two super rich American investors were interested in buying your club. He never told them who they were, so he didn't like that secrecy, and obviously they never Hartlepool was never sold to these two super rich Americans, and then yeah, I ended up writing a piece about that. How sources close to Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds said they were indeed looking at Hartlepool. So what could have been?
Absolutely. I think I went to when Jeff Stelling first retired from Soccer Saturday, and he went on the tour of the country, did his evenings with Jeff Stelling, etc. It was a great night. I think Craig Hignett was the moderator, and he's got some stories as well about Pulse, mind you. I'll be looking at getting him on at some point because he's got some belters, particularly in the Gary Coxall era. But one of the things that was asked of Jeff Stelling at the time was about the two R's, Rob and Ryan. I think
Yeah.
he said at the time that they'd gotten in touch with him just on an inquiring basis about, what Hartlepool United was, etc., and what the story was, and where they were at the moment, how they'd been, etc. They asked a lot of questions about the town as well, and the impression that Jeff said that he got was that the Pools was the number one option at the time. I think that might have been before they got in touch with Raj and the club itself. They were just making inquiries about people who knew about these clubs. But the impression that he got apparently from the publicist and from the two was that Pulse was the number one at the time. And as we've seen from Wrexham, they went, they're doing all right. Funnily enough, I think
Yeah,
if they're not in the top six of the championship now, I think they're very close.
yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where they are, but they're knocking on the playoffs essentially, which would be a
Yeah.
great story for them. I know I have a couple of mates who are Wrexham fans, and I'm delighted for them. I'm not jealous at all.
No, not at all. No, who wants a championship? We'll stick with the National League. As you've said, it's very difficult to get out of. So, we'll just keep trying and trying and trying, and then hopefully for the best. The three up thing you've mentioned as well, it's been raised in Parliament by Jonathan Brash, the MP. It's
Yeah,
also been taken, I believe, to the EFL meeting. I think the EFL are talking about it this week. And I think the
yeah,
meeting with all of the EFL clubs is next week. I think I could be wrong.
yeah. I tried having a little search earlier, and I couldn't find many updates since November-ish, where it was sort of still up in the air, but the campaign was still ongoing. But hopefully, eventually, that that, that
Yeah, I
comes
think
in.
that the BBC put something out sort of yesterday or something like that about it, saying that it had been raised with the EFL. I can't remember where it was, but I'm sure it was there. Anyway, yeah, hopefully that comes through. I think if it does come through, the sticking point for me would probably be the number of playoff places. Because as it stands, I'm sure you're aware, but it's a different system to the EFL. You've got teams from second to seventh involved in the playoffs. If you add a second automatic spot, that means that the playoffs, if they don't change, would then go down to eighth. And there's something about the idea of the eighth place team potentially being promoted in a season. It
Yeah,
doesn't sit right. If it's
yeah, exactly.
Hartlepool, fantastic.
Yeah, we'll take it.
But just in
But
general, yeah, it just feels a little bit strange to have the eighth best team in the league going up a division.
yeah, I get that point, but I, at this point, I'd take it.
Oh, I'd absolutely take it. Don't get me wrong. Like I say, it just feels a bit strange to me, just from an objective point of view. Because if you saw, I think the championship we're talking about at some point, just as an example, I think they were talking about extending it to sort of seventh, eighth, etc. And you just think like the eighth place team in the championship going up to the Premier League, where you've got like the top two who are struggling in the Premier League.
Yeah,
Like it will be, it just feels strange to me. If they can make it work, they'll make it work. I'm sure for money purposes, they'll give it a go. But like I say, it would just feel a bit strange to me. But, that's to come. We'll see what goes on there, and hopefully the pressure comes off and Pools can have even a semi-successful season next season to do, just a playoff place, and we'll go through the motions. And we'll probably get to the final, and then it'll be moved away from Wembley again, which always seems to happen when Pools reach the playoff final. And speaking of playoff finals, obviously you said that your era was the era of Mickey Barron and Dimi Konstantopoulos, Adam Boyd, Joe Porter, etc., and the playoff final being in 2005 against Sheffield Wednesday. Well, I wouldn't say disastrous, but
yeah.
heartbreaking, I think, is probably the words. The controversial
Still,
penalty. I assume you were there on that day in
yeah,
Cardiff.
it's still one of the best days of my life. It's one of the best and worst because
Yeah.
I remember, getting up at I don't know about 3:30 or 4 in the morning or something, so my nana could dye mine and my granddad's hair blue, and then I think there were about what was it like something like 17 bus coaches going down to Cardiff, and I think that was one of the seasons that me and my dad had basically gone home and away everywhere. But I think about a year before, my dad and my mum had booked a cruise, like a cruise around the world or whatever, really quite expensive. Um, and then it clashed with this playoff final, and there's like a story where my mum came home one day and was like, "Good news! I've talked to to the travel agents. Um, if we cancel a cruise, we only lose half the money, which is still in the thousands." And my dad was just like, "No, we have to go on this cruise. We can't pay thousands of quid to
Yeah.
go to miss that and go to Cardiff." So I ended up going with my granddad, who's a Sunderland fan, or he supported Sunderland all his life. But it was still one of the best days of my life. I think it was like 17,000 pools, 40 odd thousand Chef
Yeah, I
Red
think it was
fans,
about 17. Yeah, 17 was the number I had in my head in
and I
thousands.
and I still think we outsang them. But I'm quite biased, but yeah, but the Chris Westwood penalty and red card, yeah, not sure, not too sure on that.
I still think we were the better side in the 90 minutes.
Yeah, and if 11v11, we were probably gonna see it through, but I think
Yeah.
what was like 82nd minute when that penalty.
Yeah, I think it was about 80 seconds. Yeah, it was I can't remember where we pulled back. It was obviously about 8 yards out or something like that, but
Yeah, I think
um
the semis before that was that Tranmere.
yes.
Tranmere, and then it went to penalties. Tranmere
Yep.
away, second leg. Did Richie Humphries score the winning
The
penalty?
winning penalty. Yep, that's right.
Yeah. I recall being in the away end, stood on a seat, jumping up and down, nearly falling over everywhere. But that season was peak my era. Essentially, I think I must have been if that was 2005. I must have been about 13, maybe going on 14. But that was just that's my peak nostalgia of following pools, going everywhere with my dad. You know, oh, we're getting the Steve Sharp's bus today to the away game. My dad making me Billy Bear meat sandwiches for the ride, and it's fun. I've got a 2-year-old son now, so I'd love to sort of make those memories with him. But we live 250 miles away from Hartlepool now, so can I bring him up a Hartlepool fan? Surely he's gonna. I wouldn't be against him because we live about 10-minute drive away from Ebbsfleet Stadium, so I wouldn't be against him choosing Ebbsfleet as his local team, and I'll happily get him a season ticket, and I'll get one for myself and take him every weekend if that's who he wants to support. But yeah, I can't. I've bought him Hartlepool shirts, a Hangus the Monkey, but I can't really push him to be a crazy Hartlepool fan from 250 miles away. Can
Well, you can. To paraphrase Mick McCarthy, you can.
I?
I mean, to be fair, others have, but yeah, I mean, to be fair, there's two different teams. There are two choices of teams really that you can support. You can either support your local team or you can support your family's team. So whether that be your dad's team, granddad, mum,
Yeah,
nana, whoever. As long as you're not just picking the best team in the country just because you fancy a bit of success,
but
it's
that's the worry. If he starts going to school and chooses someone like Arsenal, for example.
yeah, but that's a case of putting him up for adoption, and you don't really don't want.
Well, I cover Chelsea, so if I'm still covering Chelsea when he starts getting into footy, he might he might lean towards Chelsea because he'd be like, oh, that's who my dad follows everywhere. My dad. I was at the press conference today. He might be like, oh, he spoke to the manager, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So if I'm still covering Chelsea when he gets a bit older, he might end up choosing them. Who knows? I mean, actually, I've obviously got this stuff on the wall. But I've got stuff that I need to put up because we haven't lived here that long. And this I got framed recently.
Oh, that's
Is
very nice.
it's so this my dad took me to a game, July 1998, Hartlepool Sunderland, and he kept this program, and it says in the top corner he's wrote Kieran's first football match. So
Oh,
I,
that's nice.
I went and got it framed. So that's the program for my first ever game, obviously a pre-season friendly. Yeah, July 31st, 1998. So I'll have been 6 years old. So I still need to find space on the wall somewhere and put that in here. But yeah, so hope like hopefully I'll get to do that with my son. But I have already taken him to a Hartlepool game when he was 1 year old.
And that
So
was Ebbsfleet,
yeah,
local club.
it's yeah, January 2024. So he's still only 1 year old. He obviously didn't have a clue what was going on. He was more sensory overload from looking at the floodlights. Um, I think Lenny Lawrence was the manager. I think this was the game where Kevin Phillips was announced as the new manager at half time.
Yeah, was that?
So
Oh yeah,
we,
was he in the crowd?
yeah, and then I think they announced it at half time, or the new manager is going to be Kevin Phillips, which I always found strange announcing a manager at half time. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I do remember that.
'Cause in the second half, Hartlepool fans were singing Super Kev's Blue and White Army, if I
Yeah.
recall. But that, I
Did
mean,
it?
that was a
I
great
can't.
day because I remember it was 0-0 at half time. We went down to get a drink. There's a Hartlepool fan, I think his name was Brian, saw me with this 1 year old strapped to my front. And he came up and was like, "Where's his scarf?" And then there's just this random Hartlepool fan who I've never
Yeah, there
met
was an
before.
article about that. That was the article that you wrote, wasn't it? I do
I
have
wrote,
a memory of that.
I wrote that piece. He gave Ezra this Hartlepool scarf, and he was like, I'm warm enough. I've got my double whiskey." And then, yes, then I bumped into Steve Sharp, and he said, "Oh, it's tradition to give silver to babies," but he didn't have any on him, so he gave Ezra a fiver for his piggy bank. Um, but yeah, I ended up writing a piece about it, about taking my son to his first ever football game, and it was just all about how kind Hartlepool fans are. Because
Oh, we're all right.
well, yeah,
We,
it was just a lovely day. I mean, Jeff Stelling actually sent me a message saying, "Oh, he's got no chance now. Just going to a Hartlepool game for his first ever match means he's locked in for life." So
well,
maybe he has to choose Hartlepool because Jeff Stelling said so.
yeah, to be fair, you can't really go against Jeff Stalin. That's just
Yeah, but
yeah.
we ended up winning that match. I think it was Mancini scored the winner.
That was the one from about 20 yards, 25 yards,
Yeah,
top corner.
yeah.
Yeah.
I seem to recall it cracking in off the underside of the
Under the
crossbar or
bar.
something.
Yeah.
And like Ezra just he didn't have a clue. He was just strapped to my chest like there was all these people going mental around me. So that wasn't a bad game for his first ever footy match.
So he has a 100% record
He
following Hartlepool
does,
United.
he does, yeah. Because yeah, he wasn't born when for Crystal Palace away, so I couldn't take him to that one.
Yeah.
I took him to the Vic once when he was a baby as well because I'd gone home to visit my parents. I can't remember what that game was, but we scored a penalty, so I think we might have won that as well. So he's doing all right. He's two
Oh,
for
the
two.
Palace. That's the Palace in the 90s.
No, no. Sorry. The other game that I took Ezra to,
Oh, right.
up in Hartlepool at Victoria Park. So I can't remember who we were playing though. But yeah, I'm pretty sure he's gone to two games and we've won both of them.
To be
So
fair, I
maybe,
heard penalty in Palace and just thought Andy Savills penalty. It just clicked in my head. But yeah, I mean, to be fair, if he carries that on, he's welcome back anytime he wants, I suppose. But you've
yeah,
mentioned there as well about Palace away. We're recording this on Thursday the 5th, which is the 4 years exactly to the day since we played in that game. You went, I believe you took the wife as well, to her eternal regret,
he
as you
hated
mentioned to
it.
me
Yeah,
before recording. Like how do you remember that? Because I obviously you've been to Palace in your capacity as a reporter, so you've been
yeah,
in the press area, etc. But in the away end, you've obviously experienced what the rest of the Pools fans experienced, and I was there as well, travelling from Manchester. But it's a very cramped area, as anyone
yeah.
who went that day will know. So I don't think she was particularly enamoured with the whole occasion.
No, so I mean, even the press box at Selhurst is very old, like cramped as well. You, it's look at a draw where what seat you get sat at, because a lot of them have big chunky
Pillars.
pillars, and you sort of like you sit down and you look straight forward and you can't see the pitch because there's just a pillar in front of you, and like it's right in front of the press box. So I wasn't sure what to expect from the away end, but was it was it was cramped, wasn't it? I remember
It was a bit.
couldn't see the second half basically, just looking at backs of heads. Yeah, my after that, my wife was like, "I'm not going to a footy game again with you." Like, waiting, yeah. And but my main memory of that day is just the videos doing the rounds after, because Hartlepool fans stayed behind and were just singing hearts out. I can't remember what chant we were doing, but it went on and on and on. And I remember Palace fans were all sort of applauding us, applauding the away end for how loud they'd been and stuff. It wasn't the most enthralling actual football game, but I just remember I think the fans gave the best account of a better account of themselves than the actual team did. But then Palace put out an all right side, won. We all had a day out, some expensive pints in London, so that'll be all right.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, if you look at the side they put out, the likes of Michael Elise and Eberici Eze and Mark Gahey, who have done all right for themselves since that day, I think. Elise
Yeah,
scored, if I remember rightly. So did Gay. Gay scored the first one.
I think Chelsea tried to sign all three of those as well. Well, maybe not
As well
Eze.
as everyone else in the country.
Yeah, well, they were definitely in for Elise, but Bayern Munich,
To
fair
be fair,
enough.
you can't complain with that, can you?
Yeah, and then Mark Gay, they were kind of interested in him, but then they never properly went in for him, and now he's at City. So, but
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
but yeah, it's weird because I try, like we said at the start, I try and stay up to date with Hartlepool, but most of mine is from asking my dad how the games were, seeing what Robbie Stelling is putting out on Twitter, what he's been writing. And I'm now rather glad that him and others are allowed back in to the Vic to actually cover the club. It was always ridiculous. I'm banned by one club. I'm banned by Millwall, but
For all the clubs.
that's fine. I wrote a piece about the. Speaking of Palace, I wrote a piece about how Millwall fans
This isn't going to
basically
be the FA Cup last season, is it?
it is, yeah. When Mateta got his head injury,
Yeah, kicked in. Yeah.
um, and I can't remember exactly what they were chanting. Something I think they might have been chanting let him die," or something like that.
It was something a bit grim, yeah.
Yeah. So I wrote a piece about what wrongings they all are,
Hmm.
and the club didn't take too kindly to that. So as far as I'm aware, I'm still banned from Millwall. But I've never been banned by a club that I'm actually covering. Um, but it must be horrible being on the outside, like thinking from a journalist point of view, because I go to every Chelsea game. I, I follow them all around the world, like the Club World Cup. I was at the press conference today to ask the manager questions. If Chelsea just said, right, none of that, you're done, I'd, I'd be screwed. So
Yeah, absolutely.
it's and Chelsea's a massive club, whereas Hartlepool have a community, and it's the local journals who actually serve that community rather than like Chelsea. There's always going to be people covering Chelsea, but because there's a huge pack of journals who actually cover the club. But with a smaller club like Hartlepool, you need those local journals who can go and watch the team, speak to relevant people, and report back to the community that they serve. So I always thought it was a ludicrous decision for basically Raj to ban the local reporters. And I'm very glad that Robbie and Co are all back in there now, so that people like my dad can read what they write. And I grew up reading the Hartlepool Mail. I loved it. So I'm from a journalist point of view, I'm very glad they're all back in there now, and I'm sure a lot of fans are as well.
Yeah, very nicely put. I think I've made the point in the past when the ban was ongoing about the community aspect of it. You see a lot of National League clubs, they still get coverage, don't get me wrong. They're not completely ignored, but you get clubs that are in sort of a concentrated area where there are quite a lot of clubs from the Premier League all the way down in that area, and they don't perhaps get the specialised coverage that you see from the likes of Pools, where we've obviously got Rob Law, Radio Tees, and the rest of the Tees crew who commentate on the games and give it the coverage. You've got Robbie Stelling at the Mail who does that. You've got Roy Kelly at the Hartlepool Life who does that. Danny at the Reds and the rest of the Reds are doing that as well. You know, there's so much in the way of sort of community coverage that the club gets that other clubs in our position don't
Yeah,
because of other factors. It just felt like an absolutely bizarre decision at the time to do that, regardless of what the motive was behind it. And then obviously it gives you negative coverage throughout the rest of the country as well, because a lot of journalists will have seen it and thought, well, that's just ridiculous. You'll have seen a lot of, national, regional sort of coverage coming from it that can only be negative because it's not something that you ever really want to see. It's just
I
a
mean,
bizarre situation.
I always think it's ridiculous when clubs ban reporters for. I mean, I don't actually know why they were banned. I presume just critical of Raj, and in my own opinion, that smacks of a thin-skinned owner. So it's yeah, you should never, especially smaller clubs. I don't think you should ever put a ban on a journalist unless he completely oversteps his mark. But I can't
Yeah,
ever
obviously,
imagine.
personal abuse and things like that are always going to be unacceptable. You know
Yeah,
that I would appreciate that reason being the reason, but it was mainly around basically content. It was about sort of opinions and content where, um, for example, teas. It was never teas that was banned. It was always the people who were banned and not the
right.
companies they work for. But Rob Law being banned because of the interview with Kieran Maguire, the financial expert. Obviously,
Yeah,
everyone knows who he is. But it was all based on accounts on Company's House. It was never really like an opinion or anything like that. It was simply setting out the facts as on Company's House. And then Robbie Stellings was about the attempted takeover by Shelley Hammond, etc. And it was, it was nothing like inflammatory or anything like that. Certainly in my opinion, and it just felt a little bit strange. But I mean, it's all over now. Say it was very strange because I did a couple of games for the Red, who were pretty much the only organisation, along with Roy Kelly at the Life, who weren't banned. So on the occasion that Roy wasn't there for away games, and I sort of covered them on behalf of the Red for Danny, and I was the only one allowed to speak to them. It was strange because obviously they couldn't stop them from coming down to say hello, etc., because it's not their
yeah.
stadium. But the official interview, I was the only one who was allowed to speak to Simon Grayson. It was at the time, and the players. It was really strange, and it
I
just
mean,
felt
it's
like an awkward situation because clearly, the manager, the players, all of these people, they weren't involved in it and they didn't want it, but because of the orders, that's how it was. It was
yeah.
it was just very strange, and like I say, it's just good to see everyone back and united as
I
such.
mean,
Even with what's going on the pitch, it's still nice to see people back in.
it's like when that letter did the rounds, where uh, people at the club were trying to stop opposition clubs from allowing Jeff Stelling in to watch
Yes.
Harlequin. So we've got news for you. That everyone loves Jeff. I don't think that's happening. So I'm sure Jeff's welcome anywhere.
We would like to think so, absolutely. I don't think I heard any references to anyone banning Jeff Stelling, so I think we all know how that letter went down with
Yeah,
National League clubs. Like I say, it was just PR, it was just pure PR disaster. It was things that he didn't need to do that ended up
yeah,
backfiring spectacularly, which is a massive shame. I see from the Chelsea fixture list that you're away at Wolves on Saturday.
yeah. I'll be there.
It's a shame that it's a Saturday 3 o'clock kickoff because Pools are away at Tamworth, which are in the region,
But
aren't they? They're not too far
yeah,
away. But obviously being the same time, that's not going to happen. It's a nice little Friday trip to Hull in there later on in the
yeah.
FA Cup as well. I see
But
Liam
then
Rossini's former club.
that's the thing. Quite a nice narrative of Rosinia going back to his former club. That's I, I quite like Rosinia. He's a very personable manager. I know everyone's taking a mickey out of him, for little things that he does. Like the other night against Arsenal when he tried to control the ball as it was dropping out of the air, and he just
It went miles away.
completely, it just went miles away. Completely did not control it. And I was in the press box thinking, oh, that's going to go viral. But I think he can laugh at himself as well. So I've quite enjoyed getting to know him ever since he took over from Enzo Maresca. And yeah, so I'll be at Wolves on Saturday, and then I think they have Leeds, then
Yep,
Hull, and then maybe it's Burnley, and then
it is
Arsenal.
Burnley.
So
And then it's
unfortunately,
Arsenal. You're doing well so far. Keep going. No, I'm
oh,
joking. We'll run through the rest of the season, but
well,
yeah, it's pretty good effort there. Aston Villa, Newcastle, and Chelsea finishes. Sorry, Aston Villa, Newcastle, and Everton finish
I,
March by the
I
looks of it.
think I think Chelsea's last game of the season is Sunderland away. If I'm right
Oh,
in
he's
thinking
back
that.
up here. He's back up. Yes, it is. It is
Yeah.
Sunderland away,
So I'll be
24th.
back. I'll be back up in the northeast for that weekend. So I don't know. I don't know. Does the Premier League finish later than?
Much later, yeah. The final game's actually a month earlier, so that'll be Boston away the
Yeah.
25th of
Mm.
April. It's to be fair, playoffs aren't completely out of the question, so we'll put that to one side for now because you never know. I mean, we
Yeah.
do pretty much know, but you never know. It'd be nice, wouldn't
I,
it? I think,
I, I sort of basically it's sad that I spoke about all my nostalgia for Hartlepool, but I probably know more about Chelsea Football Club than I do Hartlepool, like in its current state. Because when you live so far away, and obviously I write about Chelsea every day and whatnot. Unfortunately, I have to know more about Chelsea than my own team that I actually support. So it's the way it goes. But
that's
it's quite fun covering Chelsea. I spent 31 days in America over the summer, doing the Club World Cup, and then
not bad.
yeah, you had them beating PSG in the final, and Donald Trump stood on the trophy ceremony stage, and Cole Palmer's
Yeah,
there
dancing around, aye.
being like, is he gonna shoot off? Or he just stands there. It was utterly bizarre covering that, but good fun. It takes you all around the world. Even though I've already told you that my wife hates football, and she especially hates it when it means I leave her on her own with our 2 year old for for 31 days while I'm off in New York or whatever. So it's just sorry.
Well, it's the job, isn't it? It's the job. You do what you do for the job.
Yeah, so I mean, I actually I used to be a paper boy in Seaton Carew, and I used to read the papers as I was, I wasn't bothered on what was on the front of the papers. I used to read the back of the papers, all the
Yeah.
sports pages, while I was walking around in the freezing cold, delivering them. Um, and to be honest, back then I didn't actually think, oh, I want to do this for a living. I just kind of fell into it. Just kind of, just ended up. I went to English Martyrs. Was all right at doing English. Then all my mates were going to uni in Newcastle. I wanted to go and get drunk for 3 years with them. I didn't want to have fear of missing out. So I ended up doing English literature and journalism and Northumbria Uni, and then I just got lucky. So it's and then it's, but I quite like. I still keep it on my CV now that my first ever job was as a paper boy. Now that I work in papers, I think it's quite a nice little loop.
It's a little dovetail, isn't it? Yeah, it's start and finish, if you like. It's yeah. So to be fair, things can come from anywhere, can't they? You can start out wherever, and if you've got the drive to sort of motivate yourself to pursue a certain career, it can come off. And as you said there is a bit of luck involved, isn't there? With most careers in general, but certainly in the region
Yeah,
of journalism and particularly sports journalism, you need to be in the right place as much as anything else.
yeah. You do. Like I take a lot of sort of work experience lads with me to Chelsea press conferences because the Mail are quite good at that. We take on work experience quite a lot, and I always think it's better get them out of the office because I actually did work experience at the Hartlepool Mail once while I was at English Martyrs School, and no offense, I can just remember they basically sat me at a desk and I was sat there for 5 days doing nothing. So I'm always like, I'll get them accredited. They can come with me to the press conference, see how it actually works. And to be fair, a couple of them have now gone into sports journalism, so it's quite nice to see. But I mean, everyone's a sport journalist now, aren't they, on Twitter?
No comment.
Everyone's an expert. I'm in the know. I've got a lot of
ITK.
competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a
Well,
lot of
that's good.
competition at Chelsea.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, well, you still need the papers, the radios and things like that. Because at the end of the day, as much as people can think they know things, doesn't necessarily mean they do. Whereas, certain people have access to things where, press conferences, for example, speaking to players, speaking to managers and such. And people can form their own opinions of that. That's absolutely fine. But, there is a line, I think. And it's
Yeah, I
it's it's
mean,
a strange thing to say, but there is a line because, you do still need the stuff to be credible enough to do it instead of just coming out and saying, for example, that Gavin Holohan's decided to terminate his contract just because he can't be bothered with Pools anymore and he's gone back to Ireland. I could put that on Twitter. I could put that on Twitter now. It doesn't make
mm,
it true.
yeah.
You've got to know
I
these things to make it true.
I mean, maybe it's because I'm so around Chelsea. I mean, you get a lot of grief from Chelsea fans, especially on social media. I don't know how Hartlepool fans are. I know I got a little taste for Sunderland fans last week because I got told there were two clubs in for Tyreek George, and then I named them. I said it was Everton and Sunderland. Everton ended up getting him, obviously. So I got a little taste for what Sunderland fans were like after I'd reported that they were interested in taking Chelsea's Tyreek George on loan. But I'm not sure what Hartlepool fans are like. I'll have to speak to Robbie about. I think like when I went to Ebbsfleet away for my son's first game. I think Hartlepool fans are generally kind.
Yeah, I think to be fair, particularly with the situation in the last sort of half year or so where, bans have happened and things like that, I think it's been sort of majorly positive just because of the situation as much as anything else. And I mean, there's only so much because at the end of the day, they can only go off A, what they've been told, and B, what the club are basically saying as well. Because you can ask Nicky Featherstone all the questions in the world, but if he either doesn't know the answer or doesn't want to tell you, you're not going to get an answer. And to
Yeah,
be fair, I think so far to this point, will give him credit. I think he does sort of wear his heart on his sleeve quite a lot. Nicky Featherstone, he says what he means. He doesn't really dodge questions from what I've seen. So, at the moment, it's a pretty good two-way street. But if there's ever a situation where he doesn't want to answer anything, what are people going to do? And just because they've been told something and it is credible and they put it out, doesn't mean it's going to happen. Like for example, Tyreek George, Sunderland being interested, they can be interested, but it doesn't mean that they're going to get him.
yeah, yeah. So you sort of you do that. That's that fine line, and it you report what you get told. Well, you don't even do that. You get told something, and then you have to get it second sourced at the very least, and then you have to put what you've got to the club. Like I got told something by a couple of sources over the last few days. I put it to the club today to Chelsea, and they told me, "Oh, it's categorically untrue. Can you please not report that?" So I'm gonna trust them, and I will. I'm not gonna report what happened to be told. So it's it's all playing the game in it. But then, no matter what you report, you seem to get grief from someone somewhere on Twitter.
It's a hazard of the job, I suppose, isn't it, really? But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's the job. So, and to be fair, I imagine that the answer's obvious, but you wouldn't change the job for the world, would you?
No, I mean, Ezra's only two, so I don't know if if he's going to be football mad. I presume he will be. But I was football mad when I was growing up. Hartlepool mad as well. Actually, when I was a kid, I used to get taken to church. When you do your confirmation, you have to choose a name, your confirmation name. Um, I I looked through this. I actually picked Saint Demetrius just so that my name was uh, after Dimi Konstantopoulos. So I was football mad, absolutely grown up with my confirmation name Dimi, and now I get to do it for a living and go and watch footy all over the country. It's not always the best footy from Chelsea, but yeah, I wouldn't change a job for the world. I'm sure a lot of people in the footy industry wouldn't change their job for the world.
Absolutely. Dimi as a confirmation name is superb, by the way. Is it Demetrius or is it Dimi? Because if it's Demetrius,
And
that's really.
it's Demetrius. I once told him that I did this. Uh, but yeah, I remember I got told you have to pick a saint, and I was like, oh, so I can't remember how I found it. Was there even internet back then? But I found a Saint Demetrius, and I picked that after Dimi Konstantopoulos just because I absolutely adored him. it's not often you adore a goalkeeper,
But to
but
be fair, he's worthy of it. He was excellent. He was superb. To be
yeah.
fair, mine was Daniel because I was bored one day, and because my first name's Jack, I just thought Jack Daniels was funny. So I just
That's
chose
all
Daniel
right.
out of it. And obviously, it's a religious name who's thrown to the lines, so it worked out
I mean,
beautifully for me, that.
this is no offense to, what was it, Jim Provitt. I would have gone St. Jim, but I'm sorry, Dimmy stole my heart, so he got it.
Absolutely. Jim Prov and Dimi Konstantopoulos. That was a great era for Paul's goalkeepers, absolutely. But thank you very much for joining me today, Kieran. Like you said, you're at Wolves on Saturday, and I think the game, just a pointer as well, the game against Wealdstone was postponed. It was supposed to be the end of this month, but they have progressed in the FA Trophy. So it's been rescheduled to Tuesday, the 17th of February. I know it's not entirely local to you, but it's within driving distance. Just to put it in your head.
What date is that?
That's the 17th of February. That is Tuesday. It's not. Chelsea don't have a game as it stands, and I don't think you're in the Champions League playoff places, the playoff
No,
round,
no,
are you? So
they won. So
yeah, so you never know.
I might be able to convince the wife to look after Ezra that night, and I might actually get to go to a game because that's the problem with Chelsea playing 3 games a week at the minute. It's even if Hartlepool were playing somewhere relatively close, am I going to get a chance to actually go? Probably not.
Huh?
But February 17th might work out. We'll see
Well,
if I
you
can get
well, you
permission.
never know, absolutely. And hopefully it's a successful end to the season, and you're back for the playoff final at Wembley or wherever they decide to hold it these days. They might do it at Plymouth or somewhere like that, just to annoy us. I've said that often enough. We've had Cardiff and Bristol, so Plymouth seems about right for the next one, I think.
Yeah,
But fingers crossed. I'd take a playoff final if we had to go to Plymouth, as long as we're in the playoff final.
yeah.
I'm
I
pretty
don't
sure
care where
everyone
it
would
is.
agree.
We'll be there.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't miss that. I mean, the where the goalie scored, was that Bristol?
It
Goalie
was
scored last
Bristol,
night.
yeah.
Yeah, I was there for that. Yeah, so wherever it is, I always try and make those mega matches. Where there's something on them. I'll put a holiday in with Chelsea for those days.
You've got your priorities in order. That's what we like to hear. Thank you very much there, Kieran. Hopefully it's a good season enough for Chelsea, so you've got a bit of success to look forward to there.
Thank you very much, mate. Thanks for having me on.